Hey guys, it's Julie Melillo. I'm a life coach here in Manhattan. My website is yourdreamslavecoach.com. Another personality type video just because I love personality types. I'm going to talk about ENFPs and other ENFPs, friendship or dating. What happens with that? How does that work out? Very interesting topic. As an ENFP, I have had dates, relationships, and friends that are other ENFPs, and it's like surprising how it plays out. So this is my disclaimer. This is just my opinion, and people are looking for different things in their relationships. So don't assume that like my opinion is how every single ENFP feels about it. But I think there will be some common threads that other ENFPs have experienced. So the first thing that I tend to notice when I meet other ENFPs is we both look at each other and we're like, oh, maybe they're a J. They seem really together. They seem really serious and organized. And then we soon realize that that's just something that ENFPs do. Like when we first meet people, a lot of ENFPs, we don't like to come across as unorganized or just as zany. I don't know the word for it. Like a problem that ENFPs have is that sometimes we can't be taken seriously when we're really being ourselves because we do say such off the wall things that like if someone doesn't know us well, they can think that we're an airhead or we're just like, oh my god, are you serious or are you kidding? Like people can just like not understand because we will say some very out there things. So because of that, I think a lot of ENFPs try to act more serious than we really are when we first meet people, and we often act a little bit more maybe logical and like more T and J than we really are. So I had this experience. I met a ENFP girl at a brunch, and we became really good friends. But when we first met each other, she was looking at this folder that I had, and she was like, because we were talking about personality types, right? And she was like, I would never have a folder like that though. Are we really the same type? And then I told her, like, yeah, no, like, I hate this folder. I only have it because I have to have it. If I didn't have to have it, I would like throw it away because I hate organization. Sometimes it's necessary, right? So this was like a necessary folder that I needed for various reasons, but if I could have had someone else deal with that folder, I would have. And I had the same experience when I like viewed her. I was like, oh, she seems maybe a little uptight, maybe, like maybe more like a J. And then very soon we both realized that no, we're both ENFPs and we think the same way. And this is the weird thing because ENFPs are so different, right? We have different backgrounds and cultures and our actual personalities, but we just kind of think the same way, we react the same way. And so the weird thing in a friend group is you basically have like two people doing the same thing. We're playing the same role in that group, not on purpose. And this is why it's kind of fascinating is you learn more about yourself when you're around other ENFPs because you see like, oh, we're both doing the same thing right now. Oh my gosh. So something that ENFPs often do in groups is that we're the one who has like the funniest story. Like you guys are never gonna guess what happened on Saturday. I saw the craziest thing. Like we often have stories like this, and you don't quite realize how often you tell those stories until you're around another ENFP, imaginary ENFPs up in here. And then when they're telling their story, you're like, oh, but I have a story too. I have a crazy story too. And you realize, like, oh, wow, we're both doing nothing but telling our crazy stories. Okay. And it's not exactly like a competition, but it's a little bit more like, okay, if she's telling the crazy story, I can just read the menu because someone has this covered. I don't have to do it then. And that's often the case. Like, if the other ENFP is getting really upset about something that introverted feeling wise is horrible and like I can't believe this person did this thing, this is so wrong, then like I can just relax and chill because like, oh, okay, she's got that covered. Let me just read the menu. And so this happened several times where the other ENFP, ENFPs, we have rants, right? So she would go on her rant and say, I can't believe this person did this. This was so inconsiderate because of this and that and that. And this is horrible. And it's like, I totally agree with everything that's being said, right? Like that's the same speech that I would give. So I don't have to like be a part of it. And then the ENFP would get mad and be like, aren't you angry about this too? And I'm like, no, I'm not because you are. So like someone has it covered. So I can just relax and like basically the other ENFP was doing what I would do. Then I had the same experience but it was flipped. So a different situation, I was on a rant and I was like, this is so horrible. I can't believe this person is doing this. And I looked at her and I'm like, are you not upset about this? And she's like, no, no, totally I am, but like it's the same as last time. Like you're upset, so like I don't have to be upset. And it hit me like, oh wow, that's happened twice now. That's really a thing. So that is an interesting thing. You kind of trade off in that way. So it's not really like a competitive feeling. It's more like, oh, okay, someone's like got that covered. I can just chill for now. So that part was kind of funny, and it is nice as far as friends or relationships that you do tend to see situations the same way. You tend to agree for the most part on like this person was being a jerk, this isn't right, um, that wasn't right that like they did this, or man, this person was being way too uptight. Like, why were there so many rules at their party? We tend to see things the same way like that, and that's like a reassuring thing because you don't have to convince this person to see your perspective. They're most of the time they're going to see it the same way that you do because they're another ENFP. I mean, of course, you can have disagreements and stuff, but looking back on the ENFP friends that I had, I don't really remember many disagreements. Like, we really did tend to see things the same way. My computer is being like super loud. It's doing like this virus scan right now because my mouse was moving by itself. So I'm like, oh my gosh, is there some virus making my mouse move? I don't know. Anyway, sorry it's so loud if you can hear that. And my neighbor is walking really loudly as well on his floor up there. He has really loud shoes. I thought it was a girl wearing heels for the longest time, but it's just he has dress shoes and it's like click, 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 click. Super loud walker. Okay, so you have that. Another thing is it doesn't matter if it's a guy or a girl. We're still going to see it the same way. And some people see the ENFP as sort of a girly type, which I don't know if that's necessarily true. Like, I feel like I have both feminine and masculine traits about me. Like, overall, I'm a girly person, but I'm not always super girly. So I don't know if it's necessarily a girly or manly type to be an ENFP, but even the manliest ENFP guys that I've known, like we see things the same way, and it's just like one of the ways that I know that they're another ENFP. Like, let me give you an example. So I met this friend once in a group, and we were all in a big group. We kind of gravitated towards each other and we immediately jumped into some like FI stuff. I don't remember what this conversation was, but we were both just like so much introverted feeling was going on as far as like, well, but like, is that your dream job though? Like, I mean, how do you feel about it? Well, like, honestly, like, I like this, but I don't like that because this, oh, and like, oh, yeah, you don't like that. Like, that's, oh, I know what you mean. Like, I've had that happen before too. And like, we ended up just having this long conversation about basically FI stuff. And then we all left, um, and we were like walking along, and one of the people in the group said something to this guy, and this was a very like manly ENFP guy. Like he was in the military his whole life, doing very very like manly military things, like very Rambo type stuff. Okay, and he also looked very typically manly, like tall, like in really good shape. Like he was a very attractive ENFP guy. No one would ever call this guy girly, right? But as soon as we were walking in this group, he like pulls me aside and he's like, is that guy mad at me? He just gave me this weird look, which is like exactly something that I would say to somebody, like any ENFP. That's just kind of how we think. And that might be seen as like a feminine way to think, like, oh no, are they mad? They looked at me kind of weird. Like that might sound like a chick thing to say, but I mean, this was like a manly guy saying it. And that just like confirmed it for me. Like this guy's an ENFP. And then I explained to him, and this wasn't like annoying to me or anything. I was just like, oh yeah, I can see why. There was like a backstory on that other person and why they were glaring. And I kind of just like filled him in and was like, oh no, that's not about you. That's because of this backstory with like these different people. And he's like, oh, I'm so relieved because I thought like maybe I said something and like he was mad at me, that kind of a thing. Um, so there's this kind of like understanding between ENFPs. It's very nice, very comfortable. Like we feel like we can be ourselves. We're not going to be judged. That's all really good. But now let's talk about some of the bad things though. For me personally, for friends, it's awesome for all the reasons I just mentioned. Like you have that warm, cozy, comfortable thing. For dating though, what I find often happens is it starts off really well because you have that comfort, that understanding. But what can happen, not all the time, there are happy ENFP couples, but my personal experience was that it gets boring because in the beginning, um, you don't quite know that person, so there's like a lot of mystery. But then being another ENFP, we are so open that even the most like secretive ENFP, which I have dated secretive ENFPs, they are still really, really open. If they're an ENFP, the info is going to come out, and that's a good thing. But just the way our types are, there's no mystery because we're both like so open. We're both telling all of our stories, like, and that's great for friendship. But I personally found it just not all that attractive, even though the guys were attractive. I think there's a lot of like ENFP guys that are very like, I don't know why, they're very like conventionally attractive for some reason. There's a lot of like conventionally attractive ENFP guys. And it was like that situation where my friends would be like, wait, what? Like, why aren't you dating? Like, he's good looking. Like, what's wrong with you? You should date him. And I'm like, no, I mean, yeah, he's good looking, but like, I just feel like there's no mystery. And they're like, well, that's dumb. Just date him anyway. No, I can't, because like, there's just nothing there. Anyway, that's been my experience personally. And like, yes, there are ENFP couples, and I think maybe some of it is also how you're raised. Like maybe if like both your parents are ENFPs, then that's like normal to you and you gravitate towards that or something. I don't know. I didn't really grow up with a lot of ENFPs in my life. Maybe that's why I'm not drawn to that. I mean, we have individual differences, so I'm definitely not speaking for all ENFPs to any ENFP couples out there. And you can also have attraction from other things, like, horoscope or life goals or just chemistry or whatever. But my personal experience was it was not like a long lasting kind of thing. I had an ex that was an ENFP, and I feel like we both were really excited about it in the beginning, as ENFPs tend to be. And then at, at some point, there was like this feeling like, huh, yeah, I guess that's like, I feel like I know everything about this person. Like, I feel like I have them figured out. Because ENFPs, we like to figure people out and we like to have some mystery. And like other ENFPs, the nice part is there's nothing to figure out because we've already figured it out. And that's great for like friends. But if you want like there to be some surprises, there probably won't be with other ENFPs. Um, and that's a personal preference, of course. I also noticed that um, other ENFP guys that I dated, I remember this one experience where we were like in the park, and again, we were both doing the exact same thing. And it did actually annoy me. And this is not this person's fault at all. And I'm also not saying that all ENFPs would react this way, but we were like watching some little kids playing, and okay, so in socionics, ENFPs are the narrators. We tend to narrate things. We kind of state the obvious, like on the news when there's a car chase and the reporter is like, oh, it looks like the car is turning left onto the freeway and oh, he's changing lanes. Like that's what ENFPs, that's what we tend to do in our conversations. We narrate like that. Um, and that's one reason we work really well with like ISTPs, because ISTPs don't say very much out loud. So it kind of helps that we're narrating what's going on, because it's kind of like, it is stating the obvious. That's what narration is. But anyway, so we're at the park and we're both narrating at the same time. We're like, oh, look at that boy. Like, oh, did you see how he just picked up that ball and threw it at that other kid's head? Oh my gosh. Oh, and now he's walking over to that other kid and he just like pulled him by the shirt. Well, yeah, that was mean. That was definitely mean. But because we just did this back and forth for like an hour, at some point I'm just like what are we doing? We're just narrating. That's all we're doing. Because other types, they will do whatever those other types do in conversation. And we all have different styles, okay? So that can be a little bit more complimentary than just like narrating. It just, again, I kind of realized like, wow, we really are the same type. Like we're just doing the same thing. And that's another thing with that other ENFPX that I mentioned, where it got a bit boring. I noticed that we were both just telling a lot of funny stories about like things that had happened in our lives, or like, oh, in college this one time, like, oh yeah, when I was in college this one time, blah, blah. But then like you don't have that balance, right? Another interesting thing is that ENFPs restructure our conversation in certain ways, as all types do. But when you have two people doing the exact same thing in the conversation, it's almost like the conversation, it's not that we are lost for words, it's not that there's an awkward silence, but we don't necessarily continue to go deeper. We don't necessarily continue to expand to other topics, because we can kind of just get in a groove of like just doing the exact same thing. Whereas another type would take that conversation and be like, oh, well, let's go over here with this or over there with that. And then it would mix it up a bit and make it a little bit more interesting. So I remember sitting there, and this ENFP guy that I was dating was just like telling funny story after funny story. And at some point I got annoyed. I was just like, oh my gosh, how many funny stories are there going to be? And then I was like, man, is this how I am? Do I tell too many funny stories and other people are getting bored? But then I realized like it's more about compatibility. It's the same as if you get like two introverts together and they're just like, who's gonna be that person to like do something? I'll just wait, and then they're both waiting and just looking at each other. Like this is awkward. ENFPs don't really have that experience because we're extroverts, and like we're the person who easily gets people talking, and we ask questions, and even shy ENFPs don't really struggle with that too much. But when you have two people that are extroverts, you have the opposite problem. It's like everyone is talking. And I mean, ENFPs, we are good listeners, but we're both talking at the same time also is another problem. I've noticed that like other types, they'll jump into a conversation at like a different moment, or they'll steer it in a different way. And like I've made another video on ISTPs, that's another thing that they do. Right at that point where I'm in the conversation and I feel like, okay, well, I finished that topic and now I don't really know what to say. Like, that's the moment that they'll jump in with something interesting, or they'll ask a question or bring up another topic. Like ISTPs are actually very good at bringing up random topics, and then we can like kind of feed off of each other. And then the point where the ISTP is like lost for words and they're like, wow, I have nothing else to say about that. That's the point that we have a question, or we want to know more, or we remember some funny story or whatever. So it kind of like flows really nicely, and you're building on what the other person is doing and saying. But when it's two like clones, I used to call my ENFP friends like my clones. We call each other our clones because like we really, really were. And again, that is nice, and you have that sense of understanding between you, but you don't have a lot of mystery between you, which is in my opinion, wonderful for friends or like family members, or you really like understand them, care about them. You don't feel like competitive. You feel like, oh, that's nice they're doing that. But that ended up being kind of how it was with ENFP guys that I dated. It was kind of like I could kind of see the person that they would be good with, and it like wasn't me, but I wanted them to be happy. That's how I would end up feeling about it. Like, oh, I hope he finds like a nice girlfriend who's like XYZ. And then when they would, I'd be like really happy for them and be like, oh, that's nice. Oh, they're cute. Like, that's good. Um, but yeah, there was just never really anything there. And again, that's just my experience. Everyone's different. Um, but I think something that happened to me was some of the time when I would meet an ENFP, I wouldn't know if they were an extrovert like immediately, especially some of the quieter ones, or when they're putting up that ENFP shield of like, I'm an introvert, I'm logical, I'm serious, I'm organized, because I don't want to be criticized, because ENFPs do get criticized a lot by the thinkers and the TI users for being the way that we are. Like think of Ellen DeGeneres. She has a whole segment on her show where she just dances for no reason. I totally relate to that. That's exactly what I would do if I had a show. We love stuff like that. But someone who like doesn't know you well and they just see you dancing around has a tendency to think, well, that's silly. Is she even a serious person? Like, and ENFPs actually are very serious people. Weirdly enough, like on the inside, we're very serious. On the outside, we can be very silly. And I always say that this is our mirror, which is an INFJ in socionics. They're like the opposite. INFJs are very serious on the outside, and on the inside, my gosh, you guys, they are so silly. They really are silly. If you've seen an INFJ silly side, like when they're comfortable with somebody and they're just at home, they can seriously seem more like an ENFP than any ENFP. They can just like be the silliest people ever. So I always say that we're like flips because we are mirrors in socionics, INFJ and ENFP. Anyway, that's like basically how I feel about ENFPs. Like I do really like them as people, but like dating wise, I feel like I know too much, and that's just me personally. I've also had a ton of ENFP clients as a life coach. I think it's just because ENFPs tend to be into self development. They tend to have a lot of goals, and like I don't exactly know why, but like the fact that I'm a life coach and I'm an ENFP, I think ENFPs often are just into that kind of a thing. So I have noticed like the way that we structure how we speak, just from coaching a lot of ENFPs, all of them would end up doing the same kinds of things in that conversation, even though they were totally different people with totally different goals. Um, ENFPs, other ENFPs, when we are venting or whatever, the structure of what we do is it pretty much goes like this. So we start off with some kind of problem, and then we vent for a pretty long time with a lot of FI. Like, oh, this stuff was bad. This stuff hurt my feelings. This stuff was stressful. We vent a lot out. We vent out that negativity, number one. And then number two, and this often takes like an hour per vent session from start to finish, which is like actually very good for ENFPs to do this, because when we vent everything out, then we can problem solve like at the end. We don't problem solve until we get everything out. Then we problem solve. Um, so just a heads up, like if you're an ENFP and you're dating other ENFPs or you have ENFP friends, that's something you can do to like support them, is to just let them talk, let them vent, get everything out, ask follow-up questions so that you make sure they get all the info out, and then the ENFP on their own will end up solving their own problem. It happens every time. It like almost cracks me up because they'll start off and be like, oh, I'm so lost, I'm so confused, I have no idea what to do about this. Like, I'll just make up something fake because I don't want to talk about any of my client stuff. Oh, I don't know if I should quit my part time job and go back to school, or if I should just keep doing this internship. I have no idea. And then, my friend was so mean about it, and they're like, why don't you just make up your mind? Why do you, and I was just like almost crying. I was like, that's so mean. Why would you say that to me? And then they'll go into that drama with that person a little bit. They'll talk more about their FI, like how they feel about that person and how that person feels about them. And then they'll like analyze the issue a little bit more. And then we'll keep going and going. And then there will be more and more bad feelings. And then somewhere towards the end, the ENFP will start using their extroverted intuition more. And then basically they'll get to the core of the problem within like an hour. They'll be like, oh, so I guess the main issue is that I just don't know if I should go back to school or if I should keep working. So then I guess I kind of have to just figure this and that out. And then I guess this doesn't even matter. And by the end, they will figure the whole thing out. And they'll be like, yeah, this guy hurt my feelings, but I guess it's just because he saw it this way or that way. And so then I guess what I need to do is blah, blah, blah. And so here, like the ENFP is talking to someone else, like they have a problem that they can't figure out, they can't solve it, and then they just go ahead and solve the whole problem themselves. But you have to give them enough time to get there and ask all these questions. So that's the kind of thing that plays out between ENFPs, and it's something that I think we like to help each other with, just like in friendships. I've seen the same thing play out, where we'll listen to the whole thing, and then, it really does help ENFPs to just have someone care who's not trying to give you advice or push anything down your throat. They're just listening and letting you be you, and then bam, they solve the whole issue, and then usually, even though the ENFP has been just like talking, 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 then they jump in and then they start doing. Because ENFPs, we can be very actiony, like we don't have trouble taking action so long as we're clear on what to do. So once they get to that point, it's like, oh, watch out, the ENFP is going to do something now. And they're going to do it quick. And then bam, bam, bam. And then like a week later, it's like, oh my gosh, you did all of that? Like, that was a lot of stuff that you just did. So, so that's the basics of like how that conversation plays out. And if you like that kind of thing and you're an ENFP, you'll probably like totally be down for that, because like there is a lot of closeness there, which is great, and a lot of like supportiveness, which is awesome. But because we have the same strengths, we also have the same weaknesses. So we can't necessarily solve one another's problems. We can help each other by like being supportive and listening, but we both sort of still have to solve our own problems, because we're not going to have someone giving us the TE logic. We're not going to have someone giving us the SI sensing that ENFPs need in socionics. We're not going to have that with two ENFPs, and we can do our best, but that's going to be lacking. For example, I remember this situation where I was cooking with another ENFP that I was dating, and when something would come up that neither of us was strong at doing, we both sort of just stepped back and we both wouldn't do it. Like, oh, I don't know how to do that. Oh, I don't know how to do that either. So, like, what do we do? I don't know. I don't know. And it's almost like there's no one here to rescue us, because that's how all types are. The things we're weak in, we look to others for help, and that's normal. That's why we're pack animals, guys. That's why we have personality types, is because we're meant to help each other. We're not all meant to be clones. We're meant to use what we're good at to help other people. That's why we have societies. Like, that's where we have, like, we live together in communities. We don't all live on, like, private islands alone, because we're kind of meant to help each other. So ENFPs can't really solve problems for each other. We can help each other and be like, oh, hey, I can be supportive that you don't know how to do this and I don't either. And like maybe we both feel bad about that, but I can't jump in and just be like, oh, I can use my NE for that. Here's some new ideas. Oh, I can use my FI. Like, oh yeah, let's talk about like your relationship issue and like how close you are with that person, or if you like being in this relationship right now, or if you're upset about something. Like, we can do that really well, but then it's like, okay, we've got a huge block of cheese and we've got to cut it up so that we can have cheese and crackers for 70 people, but the knife is really dull and it's not going through the cheese and we don't have a knife sharpener and like what are we gonna do? Okay? And like a lot of other types would jump in there with help. Now we can figure it out eventually, just like all people can, but it's going to be harder for us to not have people with compatible strengths around who could very effortlessly and easily just use their strengths using, logic or sensing or whatever strength that they had that we don't have. So that is a downside. But again, it's just kind of what you value in a relationship. And I mean, in a nutshell, for me, other ENFP guys are just kind of boring. I hate to say it, but I do think it goes both ways. And like, I have basically had ENFP guys tell me that in so many words that, oh, this is getting boring, because like we're sort of the same. Again, I don't think it's every single couple. I'm sure there are some where it stays interesting. I have read that if one ENFP is really educated in certain areas, the other ENFP isn't, it can kind of work because you always are bringing new knowledge. Maybe if you have an age difference and one has a lot more life experience and can kind of help the other one out, maybe. I don't know. For me, I don't know. And all the ENFP guys that I've met are super nice. Like, I really have liked all of them. It's that kind of feeling that you like wish them the best, like genuinely, and you're like really happy when they like find their person and you're like, yes, that's awesome. I'm so happy about that. But it's not really that feeling of like the one that got away. It's like for me personally, it's not like that because there's just really no mystery. But as friends, amazing. So that's just my view on it. And I hope that was interesting. And feel free to comment and tell me your experience or whatever. I like hearing your ideas as well because we all have different experiences. The theory is the same, but our experiences are different. Our preferences are different, of course. But it's all really interesting. So thanks for watching, guys.